Hey, soccer fans, or should I say, ho ho ho, soccer fans. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas, Kala Christuyana, Feliz Navidad, Joyeux Noel, Bon Natal, and that everyone is looking forward to the new year and all the new things and promises 2024 may bring. What I want to talk about, though, today, in our last episode of 2023 and our last episode of Season 1, will be an update on some of the U.S. Open Cup drama. It seems that MLS tried a little power play that may have backfired. We've also got a little bit of fire reporting and fire article writing on MLSsoccer.com. We're going to talk about that, as well as the Chicago Fire's 2024 schedule. And there's some updates with MLS's transfer tracker. We're going to take a look at a lot of the moves that the clubs have made and a couple of big moves that have come into the league. All that and more, so stay tuned. Welcome back once again, soccer fans, to Feed the Fire, a Chicago Fire and Major League Soccer podcast. I am your host, Nick, and I thank you all for tuning in, listening this week, especially during the holidays. I'm sure everyone is extremely busy, but I do appreciate you taking the time out to join our little show. And since you're with a bunch of your family and friends over the season, please share the show, let them know about it. Let's continue to grow our little community here, as well as continue talking about and growing the game through conversation here. With that, let's dive right into our U.S. Open Cup continuing discussion, because there's always being updates. As we know, last week we discussed the news and reactions to Major League Soccer announcing they are going to be sending their MLS Next Pro teams to the U.S. Open Cup, that they don't want their first teams participating. There's too much congestion, not enough competition, not worth it, I guess, if you really want to just generalize it, for them to send their first team, so they're going to send their MLS Next Pro teams, that they want to have their younger players get more exposure, as well as more experience, all these things. And we broke down all the reasons, the pros and the cons, the reactions to the reactions, all in last week's episode, so make sure you go and check that out. Well, that was on a Tuesday, and then, of course, the very next day, almost right after we released the episode, U.S. Soccer, which runs the U.S. Open Cup, put out a response. And this response, to me, was even more telling than the original announcement from Major League Soccer. Here's the official U.S. Soccer statement. Major League Soccer has requested to allow MLS Next Pro teams to represent MLS in the 2024 Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. After thoughtful consideration, we have informed MLS that the U.S. Soccer staff recommendation, which was adopted by the Pro League Task Force, is that the request be denied. As we move forward, we will continue our review of the Open Cup to ensure it aligns with the U.S. Soccer strategic pillars. We remain committed to addressing the needs and concerns of all our members, including MLS and other stakeholders, to enhance and improve the U.S. Open Cup. End quote. That is U.S. Soccer's official statement when MLS said we're sending our next pro teams. Now, first of all, credit to U.S. Soccer for not having some sort of knee-jerk reaction, out for blood, vengeful, how dare they, we'll show you kind of a response. They took some time. They probably knew this was coming at some level. There were probably some discussions that hopefully we'll hear about as fans, but I doubt we ever will. They put out a very measured response here. And what I think is brilliant, whether intentional or not, is they let the fan base just absolutely go nuts with all sorts of anti-MLS hate. Whether you just hate MLS, whether you want MLS to change, whether you love tiny little local soccer more than big corporate soccer, whatever it is, your angle and viewpoint toward MLS, I don't think anyone had anything positive to say, or if they did, they were in the extreme minority of saying, no, this is a good move, unless you're just all about Major League Soccer and that's the only thing you care about. And again, I'm not saying one way is right or wrong, but these are the opinions that had been put out there. So U.S. Soccer, I think, perfectly waited that 24 hours, saw the reaction or knew what the reaction was going to be with everyone coming out against MLS. And then they put out this very measured response. But also, they kind of subtly called out MLS for trying to change the narrative. When MLS made their announcement, they said, we are going to send our next pro teams. Like, it was done. We're doing this. And that's why a lot of the fan reaction and media reaction was, but wait, can you do that? Under the rules, under your obligations, all these sort of things. But now US Soccer is saying they requested to allow MLS Next Pro teams, right? So now MLS had to walk it back. They came out saying, this is what we're doing. And now US Soccer is saying, no. You were requesting it. You know your place within US Soccer. You were just requesting it. So it's a nice, subtle little dig at Major League Soccer that I really enjoyed. So in response to this, and now that everyone knows that MLS can't unilaterally just do that it was a request, or at least unilaterally do it without some repercussions, and it sounds like US Soccer is willing to mete out some punishment and provide those repercussions, now Major League Soccer's got to backtrack. So when US Soccer released this response statement, here is MLS's response to US Soccer. Major League Soccer recently proposed to US Soccer a plan for MLS Next Pro teams to represent the league in the 2024 Lamar Hunt US Open Cup. Pause right there. Major League Soccer recently proposed. So MLS, you got called out because you thought you were the one taking charge here, and US Soccer said, no, you're requesting, and now everyone knows it was a request, and MLS now has to cop to that, and they have to own up. Yes, we had requested this. To US Soccer, not the bold statement they put out to the public. All right, continuing on. MLS took that step because it believes that there are several essential goals and concerns that must be addressed in connection with the tournament, including developing young professional players, providing them with greater opportunity to play before fans in meaningful competition in a tournament setting, prioritizing player health and safety, reducing schedule congestion for MLS clubs, and enhanced investment in from US Soccer. Now let's take a look at that part of it, because again, MLS just puts its foot in its mouth. Developing young professional players and providing them with greater opportunity to play before fans in meaningful competition in a tournament setting. So you want your young players playing in impactful games, meaningful games, tournament settings, right? Well, you do have the MLS Next Cup tournament. You also need to get your first teams learn how to use or teach them how to use their MLS Next Pro clubs. We see it here in Chicago. Chicago Fire 2 is just kind of like someplace where academy graduates go and someplace where senior guys go to rehab. They don't treat it like a legitimate team or like a team where they're actually going to be developing guys into the first team mantra, first team lineup, first team philosophies, if you will. I've said it before. Major League Baseball does it, right? Their major league team all the way down through their AAA team all preaches the same kind of way to play the game. This is what MLS clubs need to do. This is what the league needs to do, and encourage these teams to do that. Help them to do that so they're not doing something drastic like, well, let's just pull out the senior team from the US Open Cup and let the youngsters play there. That's going to be, unless they want them to fail, and then they want to be able to just pull out of US Soccer completely, which, as I said last week, that's my tinfoil hat conspiracy. They're just going to start their own league, completely separate from US Soccer, their own entity. But anyway, the other things we've talked about, health and safety, schedule congestion, and enhanced investment. Okay, they want more money from US Soccer, fine. Everybody wants more money from everybody else. Schedule congestion, as we talked about, part of the schedule congestion is just MLS creating Leagues Cup, adding more games for their clubs, taking, say, Inter Miami, now that they've got Messi, all around the world on a preseason tour, right? So a lot of the problems MLS is citing, they've created themselves. So these are things we have to keep in mind, and don't let MLS, again, try to change history or have two different narratives, one that they're actually working on with US Soccer and one that they're putting out to the public. So MLS's response statement continues. US Soccer has subsequently notified MLS that the Federation is not prepared to grant the necessary waiver for MLS Next Pro clubs owned by MLS owners to participate in the Open Cup. Oh, so there's a waiver process now. You can't just do it on your own. All right. Independently owned MLS Next Pro clubs, such as Chattanooga FC and Carolina Core, remain eligible for the 2024 Open Cup. Okay, that's fair. That's not shocking. MLS is committed to finding a viable solution for the 2024 tournament and is working to find a pathway that addresses its goals and concerns. Moving forward, MLS will remain focused on increasing opportunities for up-and-coming players, a key component of the league's player development strategy that ultimately benefits the U.S. national team program. And they're not wrong there. The more development and the more youth exposure and development that MLS does will benefit U.S. soccer as a whole. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's why a lot of fans are upset with MLS, because they want MLS to be the quote-unquote force for good to change the American soccer landscape and bring the next generation of American talent, or continue the American talent pipeline that eventually will make the U.S. on par with such global powers like England, France, Germany, Argentina, Brazil, etc. Right? That's what we as American soccer fans want, and what we wanted MLS to do. But now we see MLS kind of pivoting away from a lot of that and just making it a top league and a huge money-making league rather than a development thing. So this is all good and all good intent here, and I'm sure MLS and U.S. Soccer are going to be working on this intently in order to find something that will benefit everyone, because that's really what the best kind of compromise, I'll call it, settlement, maybe those aren't the right words, is when everyone can grow a little bit and benefit a little bit from it. As opposed to a lot of the judges that I used to work for who say if everyone loses a little, it's a good settlement. Maybe not in this context. Now we heard, so that's all that. I want to shift and just kind of give you guys a little bit more information as to who's pulling the strings here and who's influencing some of these decisions on the part of U.S. Soccer. Because U.S. Soccer, as we saw in their release, this was at the recommendation of the Pro League Task Force, or the Professional League Task Force. So they're within U.S. Soccer's governance, within their org chart, if you will, there is a task force called the Professional League Task Force that kind of oversees all the professional leagues within U.S. Soccer. And these task force, just so you know, are not in the bylaws of U.S. Soccer, but they give the president of U.S. Soccer, now Cindy Parlow-Cohen, the ability to set up task force as she sees fit. Task forces? I don't know, whichever one it is, as she sees fit in order to help U.S. Soccer with its mission. So the Professional League Task Force every task force has a chair or an advisor, and then a staff liaison, someone who's part of U.S. Soccer, and then the various members that help come up with their opinions. So this Pro League Task Force advisor is Jeff Lahoyt, and his last name is L''Hoyt. I couldn't find anything about him online, so if you guys know anything about Jeff, let me know in the comments, DM me on Twitter at GlassHouseSoccer, or email me glasshouseSoccer@gmail.com. Their staff liaison, part of U.S. Soccer here, is Greg Fike, or is it Fike? Mike, over at SOP, why don't you let me know? Inside joke, go watch our reunion episode on SOP, you'll figure it out. So Greg Fike is a U.S. Soccer lawyer, and also he's on the Rules Committee, which makes sense. Have the organization lawyer sit on the Rules Committee too. So he's their staff liaison. There are 3 members of this committee: Sean Boyle, Michael Caron, and Richard Groff. Now, Sean Boyle has been a U.S. Soccer board member since December 21. He's also part of the Athletes Council and is a decorated member of the U.S. Paralympic soccer team. So he has some unique insight, some kind of behind-the-scenes insight that he's bringing to this task force. Michael Caron is a business executive and president of AYSO. So he's, of course, interested in youth development, or at least wants to see the growth of the game at the youth levels. And Richard Groff, nothing on the U.S. Soccer website about him, but he is a member of the board for United States Adult Soccer Association. I didn't even know that thing existed until I was researching this. The U.S. Adult Soccer Association. For our purposes in this conversation, that's the organization that ran the U.S. Open Cup prior to U.S. Soccer taking it over, and they seem to have a lot of organizational control or influence or connection with a lot of the kind of semi-pro leagues, amateur leagues, rather than MLS, USL, NASL. Those kind of leagues have their own governing body and report right up to U.S. Soccer. As I understand it, I could be wrong, maybe they do report into the U.S. Adult Soccer Association, but considering you hardly ever hear or never hear of them, I don't know how far-reaching their influence is. But yet that's where a lot of these board members are coming from, because I also looked at the Open Cup Committee Their chairperson is Arthur Mattson, who's a former board member of the U.S. Adult Soccer Association and U.S. Soccer. And then also of their 4 board members, Shauna Schrodel, one of their members of the U.S. Open Committee, was also part of the Adult Soccer Association, right? And she was on their on the U.S. Soccer Adult Council. So there's a lot of people from USASA, Adult Soccer Association, who have now made their way into a position of some sort of influence or opinion within U.S. soccer. But again, looking back now at the U.S. Open Cup Committee, Arthur Mattson is the chair, former board member of USASA and U.S. Soccer. David Applegate is the staff liaison. He is actually the director of competitions for U.S. Soccer, so it's appropriate that he's the Open Cup liaison. Open Cup Committee liaison. Kevin Hensley is a member of this committee. He is also a decorated U.S. Soccer Paralympic athlete, and I think he was named, I forget the exact title, and forgive me if I'm not being correct here, like differently abled player of the year, something like that within U.S. Soccer. And he and Sean Boyle, I previously mentioned, both won bronze medals, in the Paralympics for the U.S. soccer team. So again, these guys bring a unique perspective as an athlete, as a board member, as someone who's been invested in soccer their whole life, as well as someone who really does want to expand the game, not just for traditional soccer players. So kind of a wide stretch of opinions and influences and backgrounds here. Also on the U.S. Open Cup Committee, and really kind of the lightning rod for a lot of the criticism here, Stuart Holden. We know him as Major League Soccer and USMNT veteran. Also, just to throw it in there, his LinkedIn profile says he's part owner of Real Mallorca, the La Liga team over in Spain. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Actually, it turns out Steve Nash, formerly of the NBA, they are part of an investment group that owns the majority of the club. So interesting to note that. Little trivia about Stuart Holden. But he's been the lightning rod for a lot of this, because they're saying, oh, of course MLS is doing this and they're going to get away with it because Stuart Holden's there to push the MLS agenda, and that's why it doesn't really seem like that now that U.S. Soccer said, no, this isn't what's going on. So I think that was a lot of knee-jerk reaction on the part of the fans saying, oh, well, Stuart Holden's on the Open Cup Committee. Of course he's going to allow this. Well, no, it was the professional league task force that made these recommendations. So they did kind of get around if there is any MLS bias on the part of Stuart Holden, but it doesn't seem like that from the way developments have gone in the last week. Also, Jeremy Almbaugh is the Senior Vice President of the USL Championship, former CEO of Chattanooga FC, and he's the final member on the Open Cup Committee. So that's a little background on these task forces that are influencing U.S. Soccer's decisions when it comes to MLS trying to withdraw their first teams from the U.S. Open Cup. And again, this is a piece of the puzzle, right? We've talked about finances, we've talked about player development, now we're talking about the decision makers. And I wanted to just provide that as part of the discourse here. Some of the things when I looked at who's making these decisions, obviously I get the money stuff, I get the player development stuff, but looking at the people who make these decisions, you see a couple little potential conflicts of interest here, right? Like Stuart Holden, not only is he a former employee, if you want to think of it that way, of Major League Soccer, but he's also, as a broadcaster, vested in being able to call more games and promoting Major League Soccer and all of that. So there's a little bit of a potential conflict of interest there. You see all these other people who are part of the United States Adult Soccer Association, and what is their interest? What is their goal? What are they trying to promote? Are they trying to promote amateur leagues, semi-pro leagues, lower level soccer, player development, youth development? Because if that's the case, then is there a potential for them to want Major League Soccer first teams involved in U.S. Open Cup, or do they want to push them out and really build up what their own council and what their own association is? So again, I have to go look up more about the Adult Soccer Association or Adult Soccer Council and see what their goals are. But the other thing that kind of worries me is you see a lot of the same people moving throughout these different agencies. And on the one hand, someone like Cindy Parlow-Cohn, who's a president of an organization, is going to want people she's familiar with and want people she respects and want people she can work with and may already have a relationship in these task force positions. I don't know if the chair gets to pick the members or if the president puts together the whole committee. But I understand she's going to want people she trusts, opinions that she probably likes, though a lot of people say the sign of a good leader is always bringing someone in with a differing opinion and background so you can see all angles. But I get it from an administrative standpoint. But on the flip side, I'm worried that we're seeing kind of the same people. And we already see it in coaching in Major League Soccer, that it's the same coaches getting recycled year in and year out. And I don't know if it's a licensing issue, availability of licenses, or if it's really just nobody wants to be the GM to take a chance on a new young coach or something like that. Do they have to prove it in college? Do they have to prove it in USL first? Do they have to be an assistant for 10 years in MLS? And, well, that certainly didn't work out for the Chicago Fire under Ezra Hendrickson. So I hope that it isn't a similar circumstance and that these people really are the best and brightest in the American soccer landscape, and it's not just being recycled around. Again, I've looked up a little bit of their bio here. I haven't done a deep dive. I haven't run background checks on them. But that's what I have found, and I just want to put that out there as part of our discourse on this ongoing kind of negotiation work in progress between U.S. Soccer and Major League Soccer over teams participating in the U.S. Open Cup. All right, so that's a lot of that stuff. We're going to take a quick sponsor break, and then we're going to dive into some Chicago Fire and MLS transfer news. Some of the juicy stuff, right? Had to get the drama out. Now we're going to turn to some of the juicy league-type stuff, player-type stuff. But first, I want to remind everyone, our show, Feed the Fire, is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water. Icelandic for clear. Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best. And I had a couple bottles with me over the holidays. Definitely had to rehydrate after finding some nice Christmas cocktail recipes. Not to get too far off track, but, a little salted caramel Baileys with a little vodka and a little chocolate caramel sauce. It makes for a good Christmas cocktail. And the Skira was on standby to rehydrate afterwards for sure. Now, turning to our hometown Chicago Fire and turning back to some of the nitty-gritty of Major League Soccer, there's a new article up on MLSsoccer.com written by Joseph Lowry titled 3 Players Each Eastern Conference Club Should Build Around in 2024. And there's a companion article for Western Conference clubs as well. But focusing in, like I said, on our hometown team here, the Chicago Fire, this is what Joseph Lowry wrote as his opinion on it and what 3 players they should build around. Chris Brady, goalkeeper, Brian Gutierrez, midfielder, and Xherdan Shaqiri, midfielder. So here is his write-up on those 3 players to build around. I'll be honest, I almost left Shaqiri out. The 32-year-old designated player has been fine to good, but seldom great during his time in MLS. We know he can be special. We've seen it for Switzerland many, many times. And truthfully, there aren't enough quality pieces in Chicago for anyone to push past Shaqiri into this top 3. Even with the potential of a DP striker joining after the new year, Shaqiri and young attacking midfielder Gutierrez represent a promising pair. Toss in Brady, the best young goalkeeper in MLS, and there are decent pieces in Chicago. End quote. Thank you, Joseph Lowry, for paying a little bit attention to the Chicago Fire here. And it's funny because here's my take on this. He opens up saying, I almost left Shaqiri out. Well, you should have. Yeah, if you're going to say it, I really shouldn't talk about this guy, but I'm going to put 3/4 of this little paragraph write-up to him. Yeah, not exactly the best opinions or someone who's well-read on the Chicago Fire, right? And if it were me, I would have left Shaqiri out in favor of Marin haile-selassie, if only because of age. Shaqiri's 32. Are you going to build around a 32-year-old who spent good chunks of his 2 seasons in Chicago injured or just prepping for national team games? Versus a 24-year-old Marin haile-selassie who led the team with 6 goals and became a super sub for Frank Klopas. See, and maybe they're giving Klopas too much credit by not playing Selassie as much in the second half of the season. I think he's a player to build around. However, I can see why people are hesitant to say, let's build around wingers. There's a traditional philosophy of build your club up the middle, have a solid spine, right? So if you look at that, goalkeeper, center back, midfielder, striker, The Fire really don't make it easy to do that. Yes, we've got a goalkeeper in Chris Brady, but with their draft selection of Brian Dowd as Brady's future in question, possibly. Completely different discussion for another day, though we did touch on it in our last episode talking about the Super Draft. Make sure you go back and check that one out. So we've got our goalkeeper, Chris Brady, moving up the center line, up the spine. Center back. Who is a center back we can build around? Rafael Chihos has been solid for the Fire over the last couple seasons, but he's an aging player. You started to see him miss some time later on in the season, and you started to see him slow down at the end of the season as well. So he is not a player you would build around in that sense. No disrespect to him at all, but not a guy when you're looking for your future plans 3 to 5 years down the road. He's not someone to build around. So who else could you build around as a center back? Carlos Terán? He wants to go overseas, and the Fire probably want to sell him and get some cash in their investment, right? So is it Mauricio Pineda, who has never been a solid, locked-in starter, but can play defensive mid, can play center back if needed? He seems to be more of a utility guy the way the Fire have used him lately. So can you build around him as a center back? And he did get opportunities a couple years ago as a starting center back with the Fire, and it just seemed like he wasn't of the quality to be a week in, week out starting center back in Major League Soccer. Maybe he's grown into that. Maybe they're going to be totally fine with him and Chihos if they move on from Terán in an offseason or in a transfer window. But it doesn't seem like he's a solid guy you're going to say, this is a guy I'm going to build around as a center back. Moving into the midfield, I 100% agree. Brian Gutierrez is the guy to build around. He is young enough. He has not shown that he is a must transfer, or you're going to have teams from Europe coming in saying, we must sign Brian Gutierrez. We cannot miss out on another young American talent. We have to get him. He hasn't proven to be that caliber, to garner that kind of attention yet, but absolutely he has proven to get better and better each year as a starter in Major League Soccer, and I think he is a player to build around. If you get his confidence up, if you let him know you're the starting midfielder, not Xherdan Shaqiri, put Shaqiri on the wing, put him on the bench, put him on the IR, wherever he's going to end up. If Gutierrez has that confidence and that green light to go forward and shoot, as well as set up his teammates, I think he takes another step forward this year and is a player to build around. Now looking at strikers, who are their players to build around? Well, not Shabilko. They did not re-sign Kai Kamara. He left as a free agent. You've got Yorgos Koutsias, who I think could be a player to build around, but did not get enough minutes to really see what his ceiling is or what he excels at this season. It's not Tom Barlow, who they brought in. Victor Becerra, who's coming up from CF2, spent all of last season injured, or most of last season injured. There's no one on CF2 that the first team has identified as someone they want to bring up, or someone that fans have seen who could fill in as a week-in, week-out starting striker. So the Chicago Fire have, of your 4 quote-unquote spine players, you got your goalkeeper, you got your center mid, and that's it to build for the future. So this is not going to be easy for the Chicago Fire. So on the one hand, Joseph Lowry did not have a real ideal situation to write about the Chicago Fire here, but the fact that he just talks about Shaqiri is just kind of more MLS generalistism. Can I say that? Just they're generalists. A lot of the time writing, they're not detailed and focused in on a club, and that's maybe more of a criticism of MLS than Mr. Lowry, but I do thank him for putting together this list and giving us something to talk about, for sure. Now, here is the big news in MLS. The new transfer that came in. No, not Tom Barlow, but the big transfer into the league here. Luis Suarez signs with Inter Miami. It's something that people have been speculating for a long time. It is something that I have said I'll believe it when I see it announced, because every star has been linked with Miami or the Galaxy to a lesser extent lately at some point. But it has been announced the 36-year-old striker will be joining Inter Miami this offseason. And I think it's a really good pickup for Miami. Not only is there chemistry, not only is there jersey sales and notoriety and global notoriety, not just within the U.S. soccer community, but Luis Suarez, even at 36, had 26 goals and 17 assists in 53 games across all competitions for his latest club, Grêmio, in Brazil. And by the way, last season he was the second leading scorer in the Brazilian league. So he is still doing it at a very high level and should be able to still find the back of the net with frequency here in Inter Miami in MLS. The question is just going to be his health. Is he fully past those recurring knee and calf injuries? I think it was calf injuries. I can't recall exactly. But is his injury history behind him? And if not, are they serious injuries on the horizon where he's going to be out a month at a time? Or maybe just do some load management, spot starts, bring him in when they got to make a trophy push kind of a thing. The only thing, if I'm Inter Miami, bring him in, but I hope Inter Miami has a plan for the long term, because in 2 to 3 seasons, when Messi, Busquets, Suarez are gone from this club, I hope that the money that they've made is enough to build a solid base and to continue to have them be competitive year in and year out in Major League Soccer. Otherwise, Tata Martino is just going to have to do a lot of more time at the podium talking about load management for these aging stars. Also, the other big signing, Red Bulls bring in Emil Forsberg, who has been part of the Red Bull Global Network. He most recently has been playing with Red Bulls Leipzig in the Bundesliga, had a very good career for them. 9 seasons, I think? Maybe 10, 9 seasons with RB Leipzig, has played in Champions League, has played all over Europe with Leipzig. Also, he's a Swedish international. I actually forgot to look up his full international career, but it wouldn't surprise me that if he's had some great competition history, either the Euros or World Cup with Sweden. But he's 32 years old. This is the question that I have. You're going to bring in a 32-year-old attacking player. Now, you are in the Red Bull system, so he knows his role, and he's still doing it in the Bundesliga, right? And they've signed him for 3 seasons. He has a contract through 2026 with an option for 2027. So they must like him to be healthy through that. But at the very least, they must like him to make sure that Red Bulls doesn't fall off any further. We saw them lose in the playing game of the MLS Cup playoffs this season, and the organization just fired all their coaches and management. They did not. This was too close for them to not make the playoffs. This was not the season they wanted. This was not the results or the ending they wanted. To bring in Emil Forsberg, he's going to be a steadying presence as they transition into this new coaching staff, new management, and I think it's a great move in that respect. He knows the Red Bull system. He's a professional. He comes in from 9+ years at the highest level in the Bundesliga. Prior to that, he played at Malmo in Sweden when he caught his big break, so he's been at the biggest levels. Great signing. I just hope they're not relying on him to be like a 15-goal scoring type of guy, 15 and 8 assists, but rather just to kind of steady the locker room, be the senior presence. Let him be their day one starter, and maybe they bring in someone else who can start banging in goals or really get the production up from the others who are currently on the squad. Looking at some of the other transfers around, just to keep everyone up, we're going to hit this kind of lightning round style here. We're already past the half hour on the timer. Austin FC signed goalkeeper Stefan Cleveland, so they get an experienced keeper in him. Columbus Crew signed midfielder Marino Hinestroza from Pachuca, so a transfer coming up from Liga MX. Hopefully he can bring a little bit of something to Columbus. We don't know what this means for their full roster. I don't know if Columbus has had to announce their roster moves yet because they made it all the way to the MLS Cup, or if I just kind of missed that announcement. But looks like they're reloading the midfield a little bit here, or knowing that they're going to be in multiple competitions next season, that they're really stocking up some players. New York City signs 15-year-old homegrown forward Zidane Yanez. So great move for the young player. New York City Football Group gets another young player in the pipeline. Atlanta United select Derek Williams in the re-entry draft. So if it's Derek Williams I'm thinking of, that's an experienced MLS player. So they get a little bit of experience back in their roster. New York City signed Kevin O'Toole to a contract extension, so New York City also gets a little continuity there. Derek Jones. Wait a minute. Atlanta selects Derek Jones in the re-entry draft, and Columbus Crew signed Derek Jones in free agency. This is an odd one. Look, as far as the news goes, so Jones last competed for Charlotte FC. What is the announcement here for the Atlanta United one? Must be different Derek Joneses, because according to the Atlanta announcement, he was with Toronto FC, and Atlanta had to pay $50,000 in general allocation money to get his rights. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a Derek Williams versus a Derek Jones. Pardon me. I can't read. Must still be having a little bit of a hangover from those holiday cocktails. Derek Williams going to Atlanta in the re-entry draft. Derek Jones going to the Crew in a deal from Charlotte. Also a familiar MLS name, Will Trapp re-signs with Minnesota United. Columbus Crew also signed goalkeeper Nicholas Hagen, or Hagen, either way you look at it. He's with the Crew. The Galaxy signed defender John Nelson from St. Louis City. DC acquires Garrison Tubbs from Atlanta United. St. Louis City signed defender Thomas Totland, coming over from Swedish top flight side BK Häcken. And Colorado Rapids signed Omir Fernandez in free agency. So the Red Bulls moved a few pieces around, or let a few pieces go as well. Nashville signed forward Forster Ajago out of Duke. And Nashville definitely needs some offensive push. Hopefully this isn't a sign that Mukhtar is on the way out, but they've always needed a little bit more offense than just Mukhtar. And the Red Bulls signed Daniel Edelman to a contract extension. He will be with the club through 2027 with an option for 2028. So a solid depth piece there for the Red Bulls. So that's kind of the updates on what's going on in the world of Major League Soccer transfers. But going on in just the world of soccer generally, with everyone kind of up in arms over the U.S. Open Cup and support local soccer and how dare they do it, etc., etc., I'm going to remind everyone there's a new club in the greater Chicagoland area, River Light FC, in Kane County, Illinois, based in Aurora. Go check them out. They will start play this spring, this summer. I think May their schedule starts in USL2. They also will have a USL women's club, or women's team as part of their club. So if you are in the greater Chicagoland area, I hope to see you out at some River Light FC matches this spring and summer. They're doing great things, building a club from scratch. Go check them out. And with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in, for listening, for spending a little bit of your holidays with me here on Feed the Fire. Thanks, everyone. Let's go Fire.